Jake Paul and Anderson Silva are set to battle it out on October 29th, and with just a few weeks left till their highly anticipated fight, UFC legend Daniel Cormier and former champion Tyron Woodley have shared their predictions. And while DC thinks Anderson will leave the fight with his arms raised high, Tyron Woodley has advised the Spider to be cautious in his affairs. Keep watching as we tell you what both gentlemen said about the fight. First up, he's a kid in his prime. A lot of people fail to realize this, but Jake Paul is actually a really brilliant fighter. Sure, he might have fought a couple of bums at the start who had nothing to do with the combat world, but we think he's proved himself after knocking out Ben Askren and Tyron Woodley. Prior to fighting Woodley, all people used to say was that he's never gone up against a genuine striker. He shut them up too after putting the former UFC welterweight champion to sleep. And ahead of his fight against MMA great Anderson Silva, UFC legend Daniel Cormier is done thinking Jake's a joke. He told MMA Junkie that he's not going to be the guy who thinks Jake is a joke and acts all surprised when he actually ends up winning. I'm done being of the people that say this kid's a joke. This kid is not a joke. The kid can fight. This is word for word what he said when the reporter asked him what he thought about Jake taking on the Spider. He's a kid in his prime who takes his training very seriously, and all these internet warriors thinking he's just gotten lucky or bought his way to wins wouldn't even last half a minute with him inside the ring. Also, has anyone noticed how we're seeing a completely different Jake Paul this time around? He's not doing that got your hat act, or trying to talk some school-level trash. He's openly admitted that he has too much respect for Silva, but despite the humble feelings, Jake tweeted that the Spider must be terminated come October 29th. Next, a different level. So by now, we've established the fact that Jake is a legitimate fighter, who's not only much younger than the Spider, but also has the fight on his terms. What does that mean though? Well, there's absolutely no doubt that Anderson Silva is one of the best boxers in MMA history. He showcased his exceptional striking on multiple occasions, but it's only been impressive because he's shocked his opponent with the rest of his weapons as well. Just like a boxer can't survive inside the cage, a striker or good boxer can't win without other elements either. To win in the octagon, you need to be a complete fighter. But boxing, apart from conditioning and stamina, you only need to train for striking. And when the Spider sets foot inside the ring on October 29th, he's going up against a kid who's trained for boxing his entire life. But at the end of the day, he's on a different level. He's a legend of the game. He's achieved things that Jake doesn't even come close to. And for these reasons, Cormier thinks Jake Paul will finally fall on the night of action at the Gila River Arena in Phoenix. Oh, and DC also talked about how Silva put away boxing champion Cesar Chavez Jr. That's bigger than Jake's whole career, if you ask us. The problem child is yet to fight a legitimate boxer, and Anderson here actually fought and beat a world champion at his own game. Moving on, the biggest accomplishment. Before we tell you what Woodley said about the fight, we want to talk a bit more about Anderson versus Chavez. A lot of people don't understand this, but if we forget MMA and just compare their boxing careers, Silva is still the better fighter. He has the biggest accomplishment between them. Cormier thinks Paul is yet to achieve something in the combat world, since he hasn't fought a legitimate boxer. But Anderson, he's fought and defeated Cesar Chavez Jr., an actual boxer who's won multiple championships. So yeah, it's not only the biggest achievement between the two, but it's also the biggest indicator that the Spider will win this match. Cesar trained for boxing his entire life. He should have beaten Silva to a pulp considering his exposure and skill level. But the fact that Anderson was able to pull something out of the fire in his late 40s and rip apart a boxing champion is just mind-blowing. It's legendary. It sounds exactly like something we'd expect Silva to do, because his career as a fighter has always been extraordinary. And when you think in retrospect, Woodley and Askren are both wrestlers who had to learn boxing to fight Jake. Now for the former welterweight champion himself. Honestly, before we even heard what Tyron had to say about the fight, we knew it was going to be something really controversial, and we don't blame him. It would be pretty weird to not praise the kid who beat you on two separate occasions, right? But anyway, his prediction isn't exactly a prediction if you know what we mean. He just talked about what could possibly happen, but didn't really share his thoughts about who'd actually win the fight. But just from judging what he said, we think Woodley is rooting for Jake here. Isn't that odd? Maybe it is for us, but then again, Tyron has his first-hand experience fighting the problem child twice. The former middleweight champion talked about how anyone who underestimates Jake usually gets their butt handed to them. It happened to Ben, and it happened to Woodley too. He walked into the ring thinking Paul is nothing but a celebrity boxer who probably cares more about the prize than actual fighting. But what do you know? The kid actually takes his training very seriously and knows how to fight. That's what Woodley fears about him. He fears that Anderson might enter the ring thinking he's just a kid who started boxing a couple of years back. It'll just be a walk in the park, another day at the office. But when he actually starts fighting, Anderson might start regretting his decision about not taking this fight seriously. Hold up, Tyron is right about Jake being a legitimate fighter and everything, but who said Anderson isn't taking him seriously? He has not stopped to wonder what's in it for the Spider. Does he really want to be one of the best MMA fighters of all time and get knocked out by a kid? Up next, nothing but praise for the GOAT. With all that being said, don't think Tyron doesn't respect the GOAT. He has nothing but praise for the UFC legend. He's actually been a long-time idol of his, and we're talking about his boxing skills. Woodley thinks Anderson was one of the best in the game. Now, to be fair, the former welterweight champion did place some strikers above him, but still said he easily lands a spot in the top 3 boxers of all time, by MMA standards, of course. Like DC, Woodley also couldn't ignore what the Spider has done in the boxing world. Knocking out a former boxing champion isn't exactly a joke. And then, he also stopped Tito Ortiz with a first-round knockout 3 months later after fighting Chavez. The 40-year-old called Silva an extremely motivated fighter who's managed to find gold early on in his career as a boxer, and since he's going to be carrying that momentum in his fight against Jake Paul, it's impossible to count him out. He expects an entertaining fight above everything else. Anderson, on one hand, has nothing to lose, but Jake needs this win really badly to solidify himself as a genuine fighter capable of putting away some of the biggest names in combat sports. Of course, he'll need to fight a true boxer before he gets recognized, but scratching off Anderson Silva from his list isn't bad either. Last but not least, always been a fan. Believe it or not, Woodley said some really interesting things about Jake. The problem child didn't exactly become a fan of the game overnight or something, and it's not like he discovered some long-lost love for boxing overnight either. The YouTube sensation has always been a fan of the game. After fighting each other, both Jake and Woodley got pretty close, with the former even giving his opponent a Rolex watch. We are guessing that's when Tyron realized that Jake and Logan have actually been watching combat sports since they were kids. They're both serious about their career as fighters. Why else would the younger brother want to be fighting one of the most feared men in the history of MMA? Let's see how things play out. We can't wait to see how Jake will deal with the pressure of fighting such a big name. And as for Silva, let's see if he has what it takes to put down a kid in his prime. That's it from our side, folks. So what do you think? Is DC right about Silva being the more accomplished boxer? And is Woodley right about fighters often underestimating the problem child? Let us know in the comments below. Remember, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more exciting and original content in the future. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.